Next out into the dark, right?
Yeah. Kick you out. So get that. Amplified battery. Thank you.
All right, everybody, it's noon. Get to work and do the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag. To the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Please.
Amy Melton.
Here.
Nancy Rondell.
Here.
Matt McGarrett.
Here.
Kathy Macho.
Here.
Michael Behrman.
Here.
You have a forum.
Great. Citizens comment, or something that's not on the agenda. Hey, there we go.
Rick Tarczynski, 465 State Street. I have something to bring up. I don't know if anything can be done about it. On the corner of Main and Spring, in front of the candy store, when you're coming into town, there's usually a big SUV parked there, and you can't see pedestrians crossing Spring Street if you're gonna turn that way, and they can't see traffic coming down Main Street because of the large vehicle there. Is there any way that compact car only sign could be put there like we have on Bay Street so that smaller profile vehicles could park there and make it safer for people to cross and to go through town? Thank you.
Good idea. Anybody else? Good. Consent agenda, we don't have. Talk about ordinance 439.
Steps. Yep. Right, so the planning commission met yesterday at 5:30 PM. They held a special meeting, to discuss next steps with ordinance 439. And recommendations to the city council. So I think the safest path forward, especially from a legal perspective, is to operate under an assumption. Operate under the assumption that the old code be in effect, but to safeguard that assumption. To either readopt the old code through a public hearing process as the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act requires. The MZA requires ordinances to be adopted via public hearing. And or issue a moratorium on issuing permits for a short period of time. So we can ensure that we have all those processes in place. So again, operate under the assumption that the old code is in place, but because we recognize there are potential steps that need to happen, and to make that happen, hold that public hearing and go for it as that way. So the planning commission's recommendation is to have a 35-day moratorium on issuing permits, zoning permits, until and while the planning commission, city council readopts the old code. That way we meet the MZA requirement of adopting old code, or at that meeting, the planning commission may decide to extend the zoning moratorium for issuing permits as they work on the new code. So they would have to, hash that one out. But that's what the public hearing would be for at, I think they scheduled for December 5th, to either readopt the old code and or to consider extending a moratorium as they work on doing a new zoning code. I don't know, Jim, if there's anything you want to add to that, but I think that might cover our bases.
I think I'd say I concur that the code that was in place before ordinance 439 was adopted is now effective. There have been some concerns expressed about that, and so as a safeguard, the idea of readopting the code, in my opinion, makes sense. Doesn't hurt, and certainly would forestall any further questions. So that is the course that I believe. I was not in attendance at the meeting yesterday, but I believe that's the course that the Planning Commission is recommending, and I would support that.
The planning commission is recommending temporary moratorium for 35 days. And then that planning commission hearing would decide to either readopt the old code or extend moratorium if that's their decision. And that would go to council on December 9th, probably, for a council decision to take up the planning commission decision.
Can I say something? Because I was obviously at planning commission. I'm sorry, this is as loud as I can talk. That we put a moratorium on for 35 days. And in that period, there would be no zoning permits at all issued. But am I hearing you to say, but in that period, the old code would be in place? That I didn't do that last.
That's not what the planning commission.
That's not what the planning
commission
commission
stayed away
recommends.
from legal
Right.
legal determination.
Until we have that. So just a little bit of a clarification of what I heard at the meeting last night.
Yeah.
So there would be no building allowed, no permits allowed to be issued for 35 days. That takes us, I think, to the 12th of December. And then there'll be a public hearing on the 5th about what to do at this point. But not that the old code would be in place at this time. That's what I heard last
That's
night.
okay. That's what I wanted to make
That's what I heard last
sure
night.
I
mean,
understood.
clarify me if
What
I'm
we're
wrong.
saying is there would be a moratorium for the 35 days beginning. Yeah, that's what this is saying.
Yeah.
And then just want to make sure I'm clear, but we're not. There essentially though, there's no zoning code for 35 days,
This,
correct?
Yes.
that is a legal opinion.
Gotcha.
You have that legal.
I believe
Okay.
I believe the prior zoning code is in effect.
Okay, but
That's my opinion.
we've had, I understand. But
That's-
we're not gonna issue any this suggests that we would not issue any permits in that 35 days.
And this would be a safeguard to ensure in case there is. And there has been and there can be arguments against that position, so we want to
Right.
safeguard. That we have something in place for a moratorium, so we can defend ourselves if there is someone, if someone does come to the city and says. I believe there is no zoning code in place. I want to just build something, then we would have something in place to say. Yes, we do have a code in place, or we do have a moratorium, so. It's a safeguard.
I have a couple of questions too. And this might be a question for Jeff. Jeff, within the last, have there been permits pulled under the zoning code that was just repealed? I guess since what, June 1st? Was that the date that went into effect? Have there been permits pulled since that time?
There have been a few, not a dramatic amount. Those permits would stay active. We've issued our, application and approval of those permits at that time. They'll be able to continue with their, with their projects to completion without any interruption.
Okay.
We just won't issue any new permits under the new zoning code.
Okay. Jim, am I hearing correctly that you feel that your opinion is that the former zoning code, the one that existed before the repeal, that is currently in effect? That's your opinion. However, you concur with the recommendation of the planning commission that we issue a 35-day moratorium. You do concur with that as well. Am I just hearing that correct?
I don't see that a 35-day moratorium is, a major impediment to anyone. So I think just to be on the safe side, it's fine.
Okay.
I'm good.
Public comment? Mr. William?
But just building on that, it would be, I think, helpful because of the confusion last night. If Jim could formally say that, so that other people know, which seems to make sense, so that we have a legal opinion on it. And then whatever you want to do on the moratorium makes sense at that point, but there was enough confusion last night as to which code we are in. And it would be nice to just get that out of us with with a legal opinion on it, rather than armchair.
Anybody else? Randall?
Mark Rondell, 181 Zoll. A number of my questions have been answered and there has already been some clarification. I've done this. I just want to state quickly that we're in this situation because an unequivocal ballot proposition was passed dramatically by a majority of the electorate 2 days ago. And that ballot proposition stated twice, once at the beginning and once at the end, that ordinance 439 should be repealed, period. No more qualifications, it should just be repealed. And the reason we got to this point was that it was decided that that it should be put on a ballot proposition, even though the petition was deemed insufficient legally. So now we are tasked with this revision, and I think we should take it very seriously. The moratorium, I think, is a very important thing. That it shows that we are serious about reviewing our code and our status with the city. And the reason that we and you folks unanimously approved a new code last spring was that it was deemed in the best interest of the public in general for the city of Harbor Springs. The old code that we're talking about working under now and that we are talking about going back to after the public hearing in December was deemed to be contrary in many ways to the best interest of the public in general. And that's why there was a 2-year process to develop the new code. And you guys all concurred last spring in that. And so for the last 3 or 4 months, we have been operating under a new code. And I think it would be a serious disservice to the public to return to the old code. I think that we need to say that we want to go ahead with a new process to develop a much better new code. And if we go back to the old code, I think there definitely needs to be a sunset provision that we do not operate indefinitely under the old existing code, that there needs to be a clear-cut deadline, a year and a half out, where we need to come up with either a new code or remove all codes from the city. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? There we are in the back, can't see you.
Molly Keegan, 397 East Main. The length of the moratorium is just my concern because it is fall. There could be projects that people are trying to get done for winter. So that was just, 35 days seems pretty long to me.
To clarify, anyone that has a permit already pulled this work on a construction project can continue. That would be it's just with a new.
And we have to give 15 days notice before we can do a public hearing. So we have to factor all that in. Also, we have to give that notice and do the public hearing and then give time for people to look at that And so that's why we kind of ended up where we did with
Linda Rockwitz, 519 East Third Street. And I was shocked when I learned through this process that 62% of the residences in Harbor Springs are part-time or summer or something seasonal. And 38 are full-time residents. And we have got to find a way for all voices to be heard and to work together. Or we could fight, we could keep fighting for a few more months or something. Yeah, that's how we all feel. So I just would hope that we can find a way forward. That all voices are heard and we reach consensus.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Of the permits that were pulled under 439, are there any skyscrapers, apartment buildings, duplexes, or ADUs in those?
No, offhand, I believe we had 2 new homes. And I think we've had 1 or 2 porches, and that's been about the extent of it.
I do feel that I agree with some of the comments that have been made. I think that if the recommendation ends up being that we continue on from planning commission, that we continue under the old zoning code until a new one is developed, I do believe that there needs to be a sunsetting of that. I agree with that. I also feel, and I strongly hope that planning commission puts a process in place that maybe does look a little bit different. Maybe an ad hoc committee where a few representatives from planning commission, a few representatives maybe from the We Love Harbor Springs group, a couple of other full-time, part-time, whatever that group looks like. I don't know what the makeup of that is, but I think that small groups with representative constituencies tend to work. An example is the Bluff Stability Committee. That was a group that came together of residents from below the bluff, above the bluff, to look at vegetation on the bluff in public areas, and suggestions, or rather for private areas, and suggestions of what homeowners could do based on the findings they came up with. I just think it's a good way to work, and I hope that's something that planning commission considers. I think if we just continue to go back to the model of, I just don't see how planning commission can go for 2 more years developing a plan and then presenting it publicly, hearing the backlash, trying to make modification. It just is a cycle I don't think we should repeat itself. And having said that, though, I would strongly urge, if planning commission does go with an ad hoc committee to do some work that is brought back to them to the whole group, I hope that they use ordinance 439 as the framework to work from. Maybe because starting with an old code with 17 zones that's so outdated that it doesn't align with the master plan, I think is a mistake. I think if they use the code that was just repealed as the framework to start with, and then, okay, let's look at this. What, is it modifying some of the height requirements there? Is it changing some of the zones? Is it adjusting the central business district? Is it, setbacks? Is it what needs to be, are there things missing from it? I think starting from that, which does have a lot of good stuff in there, that if you've read the full 180 pages, there's things in there, probably 9/10 of it, we would all sit here and agree with. It's the 1/10 that I think a small committee could look at. I'm sorry for taking so much time. Former educator, probably a little bit too wordy, but that would be my recommendation for planning commission when they get there. Thank you for indulging me.
Speaking of planning commission, Bill Mulder, 372 West Summit, and chair of the planning commission. As a town, we probably have more zoning knowledge per capita than anybody in the world. So there are hundreds of hours of groundwork that have been done. So many people thinking about this thing. If we do have to go back to the old code, which I despise, I would be in favor of a sunset provision, and it would be short. We are inconveniencing our residents right now, and we should stop doing that. Michelle Cruzel was here last night. She's an architect in town, and she mentioned she has 3 clients who didn't even begin the design process because they don't know what rules are going to be. So anyway, we're going to stop that. I believe we could name this tune in 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something like that. So maybe it's a use of a working group made up of a bunch of people. And anyway, I believe we can do it, and I intend to do it really fast. So that's kind of extra credit for today. I know the only thing on the table really is the moratorium, and that's a great first step. Just set the table for us and we'll do the rest.
Thank you, Bill.
I just want to say I don't have any new words, and Michael always has the best ones, so I'm not going to do that, but I agree with, yeah. I agree with what Mark Rondell said, and also start with the framework of the 439. That was excellent. And it's a good place to start. I can't imagine going back. I can't imagine starting from the old code. Again, I think because, to be honest with you, as some people have stated, I think there's a lot of agreement from generally the public with what's in the new code. And I think that framework, that basic structure is so much easier to understand than the old one. That we should start with that. I also am concerned as part of any part of this, and I feel comfortable with what Mr. Mulder has said and others, that readopting old code even for a short period of time is somewhat scary, because we have to have a time limit on that. This has to be a very quick, it's as quick a process as we can do it. And I know it's government, that's not always, government isn't always as quick as we might like it to be, but thank you.
Bill, would a 3-month, 6-month sunset
Too long.
too long?
I'm thinking 1 month,
1 month?
4 or 5 days. And if the old code has to go back in.
Right.
Yeah, but for today's purposes, I think a 35-day moratorium sets the table perfectly, and we can do the rest.
I think what we're looking at for today is what do we need to do right now? Something can be done at the end of that 35-day moratorium to extend it, depending what's heard at the public meeting, for another 30 days, if that's what Bill thinks that he would need. So, I mean, think we should make a recommendation motion to adopt this 35-day moratorium. Pam wants to say something first.
Pam Pritchett, 465 State Street. I think Bill's plan for 30, 45 days speed tracking the new result is brilliant, and I think folks could do it. But factor in, Bill, don't we have 3 vacant seats coming open on the planning commission, and they're going to happen in that time frame? And it could be a problem, it doesn't have to be a problem, as long as if there are new people, they really get themselves up to speed quickly, really study the old, study the new, and arrive ready to work on day one. That's a concern I would have, and an understanding that I think new people really would have to know they're gonna be tasked.
But I think
Thanks.
right now, we should just do this, because all that, there's certainly merit to all that, but all that can be dealt with at the public hearing and after, depending what happens there. We just need to get something in place today.
Good.
Art Williams on Bay Street. So I think I can't hear well, Nancy, so I think
Sorry.
I'm in alignment. It's okay.
That's it.
So it was 478 people who voted on this, I think. And I've been in sort of the middle of the swirl over the last 6 months on this, attempting, it may not seem this way, attempting to try to take the noise on the fringe that was going on. There was a lot of noise around the January, February timeframe, and we've been trying to draw it together. I would say that there are about 100 people with a very sort of strong kind of view what to do next. There were now 378 on top of it that are not maybe as well known. I think the decision about the time frame on this, it would be good to have those people have an opportunity to sort of weigh in, and that we would be better off including more people in the decision of what that time frame is, and then use the judgment of the planning commission as best, and as Michael Brennan, is best to sort of make sure that people's opinions are understood. I think the general fear is what's going to happen at the speed of development. I mean, if I take all the input that I've heard from the people out of the 478, the speed of development is of concern, and that's got to be worked out a little bit to make sure that there's transparency. So I would lean on let the planning commission figure it out. They probably a little bit more from the 478, which is not a monolithic group in any sense. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? I'll make a motion that we approve administrative ordinance 24-2.
I'll second.
Jamie Melky,
Yes.
Kathy Macho,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
Michael Behrman,
Yes.
Matt O'Meara,
Yes.
motion carried.
Guess that's it. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming.